Hi, I'm Kareem Lakhani. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School and the principal investigator of the Crowd Innovation Lab. And today I'm going to spend some time with you to talk about blockchain, probably the most hyped technology in modern times. It's going to revolutionize the world, revolutionize our lives, bring democracy everywhere, and give power to the people. So there's a lot of interest and hype around this technology. And early in the year, myself and my colleague Marco Iansiti wrote a paper in the Harvard Business Review called The Truth About Blockchain, trying to sort of understand what this thing is, why it matters, and how it relates to the world of business. So today, I'm going to try to address 4 questions for us in terms about how blockchain works. What is it? How does it work? Why should you care? How does it apply to my business? And how do I begin? So the first thing to keep in mind about blockchain is that in many ways it's the same type of an application as email itself. All of us use email. All of us use email a lot. And in many ways, the underlying philosophy of blockchain is the same as how email works. And this is important for us to realize. So the thing about blockchain is that it's the basic element of the blockchain is a ledger, right? So imagine a ledger, right? And the ledger has a bunch of entries. Now, the thing about this ledger is that it's not just sitting in one company or with one person, but the ledger is in many, many places itself. And is duplicated across the world. You can have as many copies of the ledger as you want. And so this is important to realize, is that the first fundamental aspect of blockchain is the ledger technology, the ledger itself. A ledger basically keeps track of transactions between parties. But instead of just one copy of the ledger existing in the world, there are many copies. As many people who want copies can get access to the various copies that exist. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that these are all connected in a peer-to-peer network. Okay? So the connections go between the peers. So there is transaction record in blockchain. Then there is a peer-to-peer connectivity amongst them. And what this does is that there's no single bottleneck that exists. That as transactions take place, the evidence of that transaction taking place is replicated across all the holders of the ledger. All right? So that's important to realize. And then finally, and thirdly, there is a notion of sort of transparency with what we call pseudonymity. There's no spell check on these boards, and so I'm sure I'm spelling this incorrectly. But the whole notion here is that just as in email, you can have Kareem@hbs.edu as your email address, or secretperson@hbs.edu, or secretperson@gmail.com as your address. Similarly, you could be pseudonymous here. You can hide your identity on the blockchain, but the transactions that take place between Kareem and secret person are actually recorded. So the transaction recording takes place, but you can remain anonymous on this setup. So this is important as well. So that's the transaction record. We have peer-to-peer components, transparency. Then there's a notion of irreversibility, which means that as transactions take place and they are committed to the ledger, it's very difficult, so I'll put that under quotations, it's very difficult to go back and change the transaction. Let's say I sent you $100 through the blockchain. And then 2 days later I changed my mind and I wanted this money back, right? I could come back and try to refix the transactions in the ledger if the transactions were not irreversible. And so this is where some of the magic of the blockchain happens, where we do a computational proof to ensure that the transactions are locked in, so that every transaction that takes place on the ledger is a block and those blocks are locked together in a chain. So in order for you to change any one transaction up here, you'd have to go back and reverse all the other transactions as well. And it's a massive computational task. And that's why the irreversibility of the blockchain matters. And then finally, there is the fact that the blockchain is programmable, right? We can build in software logic into our transactions. Say, for instance, you are a shipper and you're shipping something from point A to point B, and when the GPS coordinates of the truck match with the location of the warehouse, right? There's a transaction that takes place based on the location of that truck arriving at the warehouse to release the money, right? You can create that kind of a programmability into the ledger technology that exists. So these 5 things help us understand how blockchain works. But in many ways, this is the same way as email works. There's no central node in emails. Our email traffic traverses the internet and finds its way to us through peer-to-peer connections. We're looking for address A to address C, and the transactions can go there and make it work. And so this is the underlying view of how the way the internet works, the way email works, the way the web works. And this is what the blockchain technology itself is doing. But it's doing now for not just communication, but for transactions, right? Keeping track of transactions. And if you think about the amount of effort and time and importance record keeping is for business to business or person to person interactions, this is actually a big deal. And that's why there's so much hype, there's so much interest around that. But fundamentally, it's a peer-to-peer network with a database or transaction record that is available for everybody else to see and verify that the transactions have actually taken place. So this covers the first element about what is blockchain and how it works. Now I want to talk to you about why should you care. So I myself was a big skeptic about this. I just thought there was a ton of hype and a lot of sort of typical technology, like this is going to save the world and revolutionize our industries, kind of talk about it. My own history is that I started actually, I became an academic because I was trying to understand the rise of the open source software movement in the late 90s. And for me, open source didn't make any sense until I did a deep dive into it. And then you could then start to see how a distributed network of people could collaborate and coordinate and create software that would be competitive to Sun Microsystems, IBM, Microsoft, and so forth. I built my academic career on trying to understand how these distributed innovation models work. And for the last 2 years, I've been sort of vacillating back and forth between, is this important or is it not important? Is it important or is it not important? Finally, I took a deep dive into blockchain, actually courtesy of a workshop, actually a boot camp that was being run in cooperation between IDEO and the Harvard Innovation Lab, where they had a whole bunch of students building prototypes with blockchain. And as I observed what the students had done and what they were trying to get through in terms of technology and the applications, that's when the light bulb went off. And I said, there is something really important to the technology and why it matters. And our article tries to sort of tone down the hype and talk through the foundations of why this technology matters and how it will evolve and how it will matter to our organizations. Now, why should you care? Well, first of all, look, there's a tremendous amount of press, right? If you did a search on blockchain, there's a ton of press. So this is just going up exponentially. The value of Bitcoin, which is sort of like the underlying first application of blockchain, is through the roof. There's always some story about the blockchain in the business press. So the press is going crazy. Secondly, there is a ton of investment in blockchain startups. So over the past 4 years, 5 years, there's been over $1 billion invested, right, $1 billion invested in about 300 companies that are trying to do something with the blockchain. All right? So we're seeing a lot of interest from the VC community. And although VCs tend to move in herds, there is some wisdom to the things they're going after. And when you see this much interest across the board in the VC community, you want to start to pay attention to this. The third thing is that some of the most conservative institutions in the world, banks are going fully into this, right? So if you look at the portfolio, the technology portfolios of banks, what you see is a whole range of them are now investing in blockchain in terms of operational effectiveness that they need to do and what they see as the potential for the blockchain. So this also is a leading indicator for us that the conservative institutions in our economy are now paying attention to this. And finally, what we see is a sort of explosion of new applications, right? People are dreaming up things that we didn't think were possible before in terms of a boring technology called ledgers. And so all of these should indicate to you that there is something going on and that you want to start to pay attention to this technology and its application to the world of business. So this is sort of helps us understand why you should care and how to start to put this within your radar of activities that are bubbling up in various industries. So I would, if you were to do a search of your particular industry, your particular job function and blockchain on Google or Bing or wherever else, you will definitely start to see a range of stories that will start to bring aha moments for you to say something important is going on, something interesting is going on that you need to start to pay attention to. So now I'm going to talk to you about how does it apply to your business. And for those of you that are joining, my name is Kareem Lakhani. I'm a professor at the Harvard Business School. I'm a PI of the Crowd Innovation Lab. And we're talking about blockchain. We've already covered what is blockchain.